Hi everyone, yes, I know this isn't the Roger Waters iceberg video I promised. Don't worry, I have been working on it incrementally, I just haven't had much time to do so as of late. But, while trying to come up with supplementary videos to fill the void, I realized this year marks the 45th anniversary of the release of The Wall. So, here are 45 obscure and useless facts about Pink Floyd's The Wall, in all of its iterations. While the bricks used in both the original and Roger's solo tours were made of fire-retardant cardboard, the bricks used in the Berlin 1990 show were made out of styrofoam, most likely because they needed a much larger wall than they built in 1980. The album versions of In the Flesh, and In the Flesh are tuned slightly sharper than standard pitch, possibly due to the use of vari-speed. However, since Part 1 had to be remixed for Bob Geldof to sing vocals, the film version does not suffer this problem. Originally, the second part of The Thin Ice, the instrumental part, was meant to close out the record. The song proper was not included in Roger's home demo, but appeared in the first full band production demo, with the ending theme as a reprise of sorts. Both track listings put Outside the Wall in the middle of the record, after Goodbye Cruel World. The weird effect that Roger uses on his bass all throughout the record and tours is an Electro-Harmonix Baseball's envelope pedal. It can be most clearly heard in the live recording of Young Lust and the demo of Sexual Revolution. In 2011, it was announced that James Guthrie was still working on adapting The Wall for a 5.1 surround sound release, which is why, unlike Dark Side and Wish You Were Here, the Immersion box set does not contain a 5.1 mix. 9 years later in 2020, he confirmed that he was still indeed working on it, but nothing has come of it since. Only the movie edit of the soundtrack has been released in 5.1 via the DVD. Most fans know by now that the last 5 shows of the original 1981 leg of the tour were filmed for possible use in the movie. However, in addition, a facsimile of the Earl's Court stage was constructed at an unknown soundstage, most likely the famous Pinewood Studios, for the purposes of filming close-up shots. You can see these most clearly in the MTV featurette, The Other Side of the Wall. Jerry Hall, who plays the part of the groupie in the Berlin 1990 show, accidentally said her lines too slowly during the live broadcast.
Are you feeling okay?
Today.
This was corrected in all subsequent releases. On the original tour, leading into Run Like Hell, Roger would sometimes introduce the song as Run Like Fuck.
Let's hear it from the Paranoids! Let's go Run Like Fuck!
There's seemingly no reason for this, as the song never went by that name during the album's production.
Paranoid, or psychopaths. Also, Dallas Jones, better be making stupid shit. First equal is a small brain from 1980. It's called Run Like Fuck.
Similarly, the lyric sheet ends each verse of the song with the line, "You better run like hell," which was in the original demo, but has never been sung in any subsequent incarnation. Roger plays the bass line to Young Lust wrong on the 2014 live album. On the third bar after the band kicks in, he's meant to play the notes D, C sharp, D, and C sharp in quick succession, but instead he plays the notes B, C, B, C. The phrase, "ooh babe," or variations of it, appear on the Wall album 18 times. 3 times in The Thin Ice, 6 times in Mother, once in Young Lust, 7 times in Don't Leave Me Now, including the backing vocals, and once in Nobody Home. If you also count the pros and cons of hitchhiking, which was written in conjunction with The Wall, that number gets bumped up to 24. 3 times in For the First Time Today Part 2, twice in the title track, and once during the live-only couplet of Running Shoes. Doreen Chanter, who would go on to perform in Roger's solo tours, makes a cameo appearance during the fascist rally. She can be seen here, third from the left. Many of Roger's visuals for Brick 2 in the most recent Wall tour are directly inspired by documentaries about religious propaganda, such as Jesus Camp. In the live album Is There Anybody Out There, The Wall Live 80-81, there's a phantom harmony during the last line of Happiest Days that can't be heard on any bootleg from that time. Most existing footage shows Gilmore singing the harmony, but as we mentioned earlier, these close-ups were shot separately for the sole purpose of being included for the movie. So it's entirely possible that this element was recorded in a studio after the concerts. Comfortably Numb has 4 completely different demo versions before it got to the studio release we all know and love. The first was David's original demo, played with a high-strung Ovation acoustic. The second was an early production demo with Roger singing different lyrics and a different melody during the second verse.
You've got to pull yourself together. You shouldn't let it get you down. You ought to take it like a man. You should go out and do the town.
The third was a slightly grungier version, sung entirely by David, that had its key changed from B minor to E minor.
What seems to be the trouble? Are we feeling out of sorts? Do you think they're gone forever? Can you show me where it hurts?
The fourth switches back to the key of B and is structured more closely to the final song.
I am a physician, and I can handle your condition like a magician. If you show me where it hurts.
Most fans know that the children's chorus on Brick 2 was not part of the original plan, and it was added at the suggestion of producer Bob Ezrin. Rather than recording an extra verse for the track, Bob simply copy-pasted the instrumental from the first verse, a complex process to do on tape in 1979, and had the kids sing over that. If you listen very carefully, you can faintly hear Roger and David's vocals underneath the voices of the kids. Unlike the wife, the teacher appears in his human form for most of the movie until the animated trial sequence, but it wasn't always that way. Director Alan Parker experimented with rebuilding the puppet for the teacher and having that leering over the kids during the Brick 2 education segment.
For instance, at the end of that tunnel originally was going to be this giant inflatable of the teacher, and we had that on the end of a crane, and of course that didn't work. What happened was, at the end of it, anything that I had actually taken from their stage show, everything theatrical didn't work. So everything that's in the film was of a more realistic nature.
The original teaser trailer for The Wall contained the shortened movie edit of Brick 2 without the teacher's voice. By contrast, the full-length trailer uses an extended mix of Brick 2 where the opening bars of the single edit are looped.
The music. The movie.
Contrary to popular belief, Waters does not make a cameo in the film during Pink's marriage. I don't know who that fellow is supposed to be, but I know very well what Roger looks like, and that ain't him. For earlier shows in 2010 during his The Wall Live solo tour, Roger experimented with the vocals on Waiting for the Worms. Some nights he would try to sing his parts like normal. Sometimes he would let Robbie Wyckoff take that line and he would do the low parts. And on a particular show in
Cleveland, Ohio,
it seemed like he tried using a vocal tape from the 1990 Berlin show. Eventually, he gave up and just started miming to the studio vocals. No, I'm not kidding. Go and compare them side by side. They are exactly the same. No matter whether in a documentary or an EPK or whatever, almost every edit of the original Wall 1980 to 81 footage haphazardly switches between 35mm shots and videotape shots. If you aren't well versed in what the visual differences are between film and video, you can easily tell which is which by the color of Roger's headphones. In 1980, he wore a pair of white Beyerdynamic DT100s, which were an industry standard at the time. In 1981, he switched to a black pair of the same model. The film version of Waiting for the Worms reuses bits of animation meant for the Animals tour, specifically this dog creature grabbing meat off a hook. The doctor who gives Pink his injection during Comfortably Numb was meant to play a more central role in the story. He was meant to be one of the main caricatures Pink hallucinates, hence why he appears prominently in early concept art and why the original title of the song was The Doctor. His role was more or less entirely removed from the record, although in the film, Pink does imagine him on the beaches of Anzio with all the other characters. Speaking of Anzio, the location where the wartime scenes were shot is known as Saunton Sands, a beach in North Devon, England, also used by Storm Thorgerson to photograph the cover for A Momentary Lapse of Reason. The show Must Go On is skipped entirely in both the film adaptation and the Berlin 1990 show. Probably because it's not very good. Oh, did I just say that? Faint screams from Roger can be heard during the solo in Young Lust, which still exist in the film adaptation, yet even more screams were added in post-production nearing the end of the solo. These re-recorded screams are the same ones heard during Comfortably Numb. At the end of the Berlin 1990 performance of Brick 2, Thomas Dolby pops out dressed as the teacher playing a guitar solo, yet what we hear isn't actually what he's playing. In the live broadcast, you can audibly hear his wireless RF receiver crackle and lose power before the synth cuts out entirely. This was dubbed over using the dress rehearsal for the commercial releases. Cynthia Fox, a Los Angeles radio DJ, acted as the MC for the opening night of the original tour. Roger would later use her talents again when she and Paraquat Kelly performed their Fish Report with a Beat skit for the Radio Chaos album and shows. An uncropped film scan of the original Marching Hammers animated sequence appears briefly in a documentary about the Roger Waters solo tour, showcasing how the film was digitally extended to fit the surrounding wall. This is, to date, the highest quality the original tour animation has ever been seen. Goodbye Blue Sky did not have an animation for the original tour. Starting in 1981, a storyboard of the sequence was projected on the screen behind the wall instead. The technical problems during Mother and the Berlin 1990 show infamously led to Sinead O'Connor refusing to mime or re-record her bits of the show on the grounds that Roger was forcing her to. If one watches back the actual broadcast, however, one could see why Roger might have told her that. The power cuts out after the first verse. Then the television feed fades into the dress rehearsal footage, then awkwardly back into the live feed in the middle of a line. Seems pretty confusing to me. Also, an interesting note about the differences between the dress rehearsal and the live footage, it seems that in the dress rehearsal, the members of the band shared one microphone, whereas for the actual gig, they had separate microphones. An extra bar is played on the drums by Nick and Willie Wilson after the second verse of Brick 2 during the first couple of shows in February 1980. By the time the show arrived in Earl's Court that August, the extra bar had been removed, and the segment plays similar to the album version. While we're on the topic of drummers, due in part to the assistance of Willie Wilson and Nick's drum tech Clive Brooks, certain songs have additional percussion elements that weren't on the album and haven't been used in subsequent iterations, such as bongos during Brick 1, rototoms during Happiest Days, and cowbell during the loud parts of One of My Turns. A bootleg recording from May 1990 documenting rehearsals for the Berlin show contains a somewhat hidden secret. An alternate mix of the trial can be heard at the end, wherein the judge's vocals are left unprocessed.
The evidence before the court is incontrovertible. There's no need for the jury to...
Two different sets of life masks were made of the band prior to the start of the 1980 tour. These can be seen on the front and back covers of the Is There Anybody Out There box release. According to the book Comfortably Numb, A History of the Wall by Vernon Fitch, the ones with smaller eye holes were the life masks meant for the beginning of the show. The ones with larger holes were left unpainted and were known as the death masks, meant to be worn during the fascist part of the show. Aside from Roger himself, Snowy White is the only band member to play in every single live iteration of The Wall. First as a member of the Surrogate Band in 1980, then as a member of the Bleeding Heart Band in Berlin in 1990, then as a member of Roger's backing band for the Wall Live Tour starting in 2010. In some early 2010 shows, Roger for some reason does not wear the fascist costume like he would later on. Instead, he did these parts in a black hoodie with completely different shades. He looks like fucking Walter White. In the live broadcast of the Berlin 1990 show, Van Morrison is so off-key coming into his first line that they had to copy-paste the start of the second verse over it to cover it up. The original Wall tour was the first one where Roger used pre-recorded vocal tapes. He had blown his voice out on February 7th, the night of the premiere, leading to David filling in for parts of The Trial and Hey You that night and the following evening. A vocal tape for The Trial was hastily recorded, you can tell because of how frequently the mic pops,
I always said it come to no good.
and was used from February 9th onwards. By contrast, Roger's solo tour of The Wall relied heavily on pre-recorded vocals. From my observations, comparing bootlegs and the official film release, he mimed to In the Flesh, Brick 1, Happiest Days, Brick 2, Mother technically doesn't count because he's actually singing live on top of the 1980 recording, What Shall We Do Now, Young Lust, One of My Turns, Don't Leave Me Now, Brick 3, Hey You, Is There Anybody Out There, The High Parts of Nobody Home, Vera, Bring the Boys Back Home, In the Flesh, Run Like Hell, Waiting for the Worms, and The Trial. Roger won a BAFTA award in 1983 for Best Film Song, that song being Brick 2. This is interesting because in America, the Academy specifies that a song must be written specifically for the film prior to any other usage, which disqualifies the entirety of The Wall from the Academy Awards. Though I could not find a list of rules for BAFTA eligibility, I assume that does not apply to the Best Film Song category. Also, Roger takes the award in the most quintessentially Raj way. He just picks it up, raises it high, mouths "thank you" to no one in particular, and leaves. Even the narrator doesn't really know what to say as he walks off stage. He's just like, "That's Roger Waters."
That's Roger Waters.
The dramatic moment in the Roger solo version of Comfortably Numb, where he smashes the wall into colorful bits, was originally much different, where Roger would appear to pull the wall away like a curtain. He found it difficult to sync his movements to the projected images, and thus the scene was changed to something much simpler, yet much more effective. Despite Roger claiming the reels of film from the June 1981 wall shows were 70mm,
we did 3 songs in 70mm.
This is blatantly false. At the time, 70mm was a very expensive format to shoot on, mainly reserved for epics and big-budget blockbusters. However, starting in the 70s and continuing into the 80s, many films shot on standard 35mm would be blown up or transferred to the 70mm format to take advantage of its improved color palette, stability, and 6 channels of audio as opposed to 1 mono channel. The most famous example of this would probably be The Empire Strikes Back's limited run in 1980. We know now, due to careful scrutiny of photographs, most likely done by R&D user NuffM, that the June 81 gigs were shot on Panavision Panaflex Gold cameras, which shot anamorphic on Eastman 125T 35mm stock. It's most likely that whoever was in charge of the film prints blew up the shows to 70mm to better demonstrate to Waters, Gerald Scarfe, DP Michael Sorensen, and Parker exactly what the shows would look like on the big screen. Comfortably Numb has had multiple different singers over the years, depending on what version you listen to. Gilmour and Waters obviously sing the Pink Floyd original, but singers for the verse, the Doctor segments, have included Greg Detchert and Mickey Feet in 1984, Richard Wright and John Caron and Guy Pratt from 1987 to 1994, Sam Brown and Simon Phillips at a benefit gig in 1986, Bob Geldof and Robert Wyatt in 2002, David Bowie as a special guest in 2006, Just Richard on his own in 2006 for the tour, Benedict Cumberbatch as a special guest in 2016, just John Caron in the first half of 2015, and Chuck Leavell for the second half of 2015. For the chorus, David's part, singers have included the aforementioned Van Morrison in 1990, Bruce Hornsby in 91, Don Henley in 92, Doyle Bramhall II from 99 to 2000, Chester Kamen in 2002, John Caron from 2006 to 2008, Robbie Wyckoff from 2010 to 2013, Eddie Vedder as a special guest in both 2012 and 2017, and most recently, Jonathan Wilson from 2017 to 2018. On the February 9th, 1980 show in the LA Sports Arena, not only does the band come in too early before Roger gets to belt out the but the teacher's laugh never plays either, forcing Roger to come up with his own on the spot. The sources of the television samples on the album are as follows. One of My Turns uses clips from the soap opera Another World, episodes 3864 to 3866, which aired in September 1979, although no online copies of these episodes exist. Is There Anybody Out There opens with a section of a Gunsmoke episode, season 12 episode entitled Fandango.
Be a lot less safe to stay here. Your father's going to pick up our trail before long.
Nobody Home samples the sitcom Gomer Pyle USMC, Season 4, Episode 7, titled Gomer Says Hi to the President.
Who's that? Rose Filcher. Filcher.
And Vera features a clip from the 1969 film The Battle of Britain.
This Roman meal bakery thought you'd like to know.
In the film, all the clips are obviously replaced with scenes from the Dam Busters, most likely due to licensing issues with the various TV shows. In the original shows, the TV clips were seemingly patched in live from a real television set, as they're different in every single recording. And that's all I really have for now. I know this isn't necessarily what you guys wanted. I think it'll hold you guys over in the meantime. These are all pretty obscure facts, and oh, don't worry, we'll get into an even deeper dive with the next video. I don't think you guys are really ready for the Roger Waters iceberg. I mean, you have no idea what this fucking thing is going to be. See ya then.